Ask any student and they will tell you that exam time is the most stressful, sleep-deprived, and grueling part of being in college, and with all the work that many students put in, they still fail to get the grades they want. I was once that student who worked extremely hard to get good grades, yet I always fell short until I learned a few critical study habits. So bosses, in this video I'll share with you some of my most effective study tricks that you yourself can use to go from zero to hero and get the amazing grades that you've always wanted. Back in college, I was a very hardworking student. I went to all my classes, read every assigned chapter, and put in more hours of studying than I could count. With all this hard work being put in, you would expect that I would be one of the top students in my program, right? Well, unfortunately, this is not the case. Every test and exam I got back was far from being anything to brag about, and with only a year left in my program, I started to question whether a master's program was in the cards for me. You see, I always wanted to be the first person in my family to get a master's degree, but with these subpar marks, my dream was slowly slipping away. What was worse is that my finals were just a month away, and these grades would be considered if I were to apply to other programs after my undergraduate degree, so I needed to find a way to improve my academic performance, and in a hurry. A month before final exams, I had just been introduced to podcasts, which I would listen to on my way to and from class. One day, I was searching new episodes and came across one that immediately caught my attention. It was titled, 4 Study Hacks Top Students Will Never Tell You. Of course, given how desperate I was to improve my grades before applying to grad school, I hit the play button and began to listen. The podcast continued playing, and finally I got to the first tip, which is to focus on the core concepts. It said that many students will read the textbook from front to back and try and memorize every detail while failing to grasp the main concepts at a deeper level, which allows them to create more insightful answers on their exam. This point made total sense to me. I would use how much I read as my indicator for sufficient studying, rather than what I read. I thought to myself, was I writing poor answers on my exam because I didn't understand the concepts as well as I had thought? I then listened on. The second study hack was to write down your notes by hand. I laughed to myself thinking this tip was rather antiquated given that typing is so much faster, but then I heard an interesting fact. A 2014 study showed that students who handwrite their notes retain information much more effectively than those who type their notes. I figured that typing meant that I was getting more of the information in my notes, but it turns out the act of writing your notes by hand makes you process the information in your own words, leading to better retention. We were 2 tips into the podcast, and I began to get a feeling that these newly found tips would definitely help me in my quest to getting better grades. Study hack number 3 was to use Parkinson's Law when studying. Parkinson's Law, I thought to myself, isn't that a disease? Well, apparently Parkinson's Law is the idea that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. And in the case of studying, that involves not setting time limits on your study periods. In essence, by not setting time periods for studying, you are more prone to lacking the focus needed when reading and writing notes, since you perceive your study time to be endless. The podcast stated that top students allocate defined periods of time to study where they focus intensely, then take breaks to give their brain a chance to process its newly acquired information. I had to kick myself because I was definitely the student who thought that the more hours I studied, the more prepared I was, but in reality what matters more is how focused you are when you crack open the books. As my commute to school was coming to an end, I was then presented with the 4th and final study hack, which quite honestly changed the course of my academic career. The hack was so impactful that I still remember exactly how it was phrased by the podcast host. He said, "The 4th study hack is to adopt study habits from the top level students." I spent most of my college career comparing myself to the highest achieving students, rather than asking them for tips and advice. After class that day, I began talking with some of the best students in my class, and their tips were instantly impactful in building my own study habits. They mentioned how they would use flashcards to learn key definitions, how they would teach others the content to better learn it themselves, and even how they would ensure they got enough rest the night before big exams in order to assure their success. 2 months after hearing this podcast, I was a completely different student. I began to study the pertinent topics of all my courses, cut out all distractions when studying, limited my study periods, and continuously searched for better study methods And to my delight, I got on the Dean's List for the first time in my college career. And as they say, the rest is history. Thanks for watching. For more advice to help you achieve the life you deserve, hit the subscribe button now.